Hey, this is Suzanne in Ohio. Hey, I'm back to finish our little journal cover that we started the other day. So I want to catch up to snuff here about what I did. And um, if you remember this, that we were working on, it's just a fabric collage, and my intention for it is a journal cover. If you're real interested in how I laid this down and you haven't seen the first video, go back and watch the previous video concerning this fabric collage. So for those of you that are following along, and I hope you're stitching with me, what I did was I went ahead, as we discussed, and stitched down all my edges of everything, not counting the outside perimeter, because I'm going to stitch all that when I put the lining on the inside. So let's talk about the lining for a minute, and I'll tell you and show you some ideas that I have going on here. All right, I ripped myself a piece of lining, and I know you can't tell, but it's just a real light beige, real thin, and it's that tone on tone where there's a little pattern pressed onto it with paint. Actually, that's how they make it. And then I got that ready, and then I came up with this idea um, because I like a lot of raw edges sticking out. Now, if you don't like that, you do it according to your style. But I ripped it a little longer this way from top to bottom because I want this to stick out. And I thought, well, my first thought was, oh, I'll put some, journal jewelry on it or some fibers or something like that. And then I thought of this. So I went back to my little scrap box and let's see if I could move this camera slightly. Yeah. I went back to my scrap box and I found these. So I just laid them down because that's what's going to show hanging out at the bottom of the journal. And I started stitching it and I thought, oh my gosh, what am I doing? In this case, this is a good application for glue. Now, I usually use Fabri-Tac, but I couldn't get any the last time, and I have Fabri-Fix, which is made by the same company, and truly, I don't know what they say their difference is between Fabri-Fix and Fabri-Tac. But anyways, that's what I'm going to do. So I've got these stitched on, and I'm just going to lift up some edges here, and I don't want to put much because it'll seep through to the other side. I just want to put enough to hold it and attach these things. Boy, I'm not doing good today, am I? I'm sorry about that. Just move this camera for a minute so you can see it. And again, please forgive me because I told you I'm in temporary circumstances and I don't have all of my normal equipment and supplies or anything like that. So let's just get this on here enough to hold it, and then you'll see in a minute when I put it as the lining, it's going to be just perfect, just fine. It's another good lesson in not throwing anything away. These were already scraps off of many things that I've saved and rescued from the thrift store and so on and so forth. Now, I assume this Fabri-Fix will work just like the Fabri-Tac. All right, so I'm going to put this aside for just a second and pull this in. Get all myself organized here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is turn this over, and you can see some of my stitches here. Get these extra threads out of the way. All right, now I sewed or now glued these pieces to the wrong side of the lining, because I want the good side of the lining where the print is. I want it on the inside of my journal. So I'm going to position it with a little bit of this sticking out, all the top edge and the side edges, and then I'm going to flip it over and see if I have it in the right place. So yes, I think I do. Okay, good. So I've got my little interesting scraps hanging out the bottom here. That one could be a little lower, but you know what? I stitched one side of it, so I can't move it. And oh well, what did we say the other day? This is not about perfection. It is about creativity, and what you think is an imperfection is probably going to be your most interesting element. So we're going to smooth this down. Now at this point, I feel like I've got it in the right position, and I want a pocket on the inside of this journal. So I found a scrap of that green we looked at the other day, and I want to place that uh, in line with the actual journal cover, because right here is where I'm going to be stitching through all these layers. So I just want to make sure I put it in the right place so that when I'm stitching through my entire sandwich, then I'll go all the way through and catch everything at one time. So that's about where I like it, right there. And those little scraps even make this side of the journal look interesting. So let's pin that in place. And I try to keep my pins out of the track of where I know I will be hand stitching. Get these in place. And I'm making sure my pins go all the way through all these layers. In other words, all the way through my sandwich. That word comes from quilters, in case you are not a quilter. And just pulling this over and checking. Looks good, looks good. Put another one here. Now I also want to stabilize all this up here. I don't want anything scooching around when I start traveling around the outside, because I am going to be stitching from the front. I want to make sure that all my edges are caught on the front. So I work from the front. And that way, if I want to add a little decorative stitch or anything goes wrong, I can see it right away. All right. Now I've got one other little idea. When I ripped this piece of green, I had this tiny scrap and I thought, oh my gosh, I might as well add it in. So I thought, I'll put another little pocket right here. And I thought, well, that's pretty plain. So I've got these little doohickeys here. I don't know what you call them. We were doing a project several years ago where we were making wristlets, cuffs, and some of these were designed for that. And that looks just perfect. So separately, I'm going to stitch this piece to the pocket, and then I'll apply the pocket with a running stitch going just deep enough to catch my, that piece of felt in there. And that'll make an extra little pocket for a note or something. I might even scoot it down a little bit. But that's for later on. So if you see something laying on your desk, think of how you can use it. I did a whole series of journals on what's on my desk, and they ended up to be some of my most interesting ones. All right, now we're ready to stitch this piece, which is our lining, our pocket, and I said I'm going to work from the front, so I'm going to turn it over. And I always opt to stitch around the edge with embroidery thread. Now, at this stage, you could take this whole thing to the sewing machine and just do it on the machine and voila, be done. But since this is all hand stitch, slow stitch, I will do it with embroidery thread. And depending on my color scheme, sometimes I don't care what color I'm using. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just barely going to get it started because I have some needles here with just some short pieces of thread in it, and I want you to see how I do it. And I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do all this hand stitching all the way around this. But I like to start on what's going to be the back of the journal. And if everything looks okay to me, I can start in a corner, I can start right here. It does not matter. And I let my knots show on the front side, because after all, it is all about the creativity and the imperfection. I like those things. Now, if you're still, or if you're a neatnik, and that goes against the grain with you, do whatever is best for you. And I know I want a fairly long stitch to show on the front. So I'm going to put my needle in. Now first I'm going to bring it down here a little bit. Okay, so let's get under the camera here. I am going to take a healthy enough stitch that my embroidery thread shows up. And it almost, oh, it acts like a little border or anything. Think of it however you want, but it does kind of set it off. Now I'm going to turn it over so you can see I've got a tiny little stitch showing on that side. And that's all I need to make sure I went all the way through all my layers. So let's stitch for just a minute until I've used up the usable part of this thread that's already on this needle. And I've got a nice, slick, strong needle, so I can take more than one stitch at a time. And now I'm going to turn the corner. And just a couple more stitches, and I will probably tie it off. Because, like I said, that was just a scrap of thread. Now, about this edge that's sticking out, the edge of my lining, I love that. If you don't care for it, rip your lining a little bit smaller than I have. I actually match it right up with the size of your front cover, if that's what you want to do. But I like it that way. And there have been times I took some alcohol ink or even distress ink and just stain the edges. And if I decide to spritz the whole thing with coffee, which gives a wonderful look, and I'll speak about that in a second, then the dark part of the coffee gravitates to the outside edge and it gives you a beautiful old vintage look to the fabric. Okay, I've used all the thread I possibly can. Let me get this needle out of here. That's how close of a call it was. So, just pull it tight. And I like to leave a little tail. So I left a little tail there. And that is the look you'll get. Now, when you're all done around the edge, you can do it before or after, but I like to do it after on a project like this. I do a little bit of dimple quilting in here in these big spaces that has no stitches in it, you know, to pull the sandwich together. And if I do the dimple quilting, what's going to happen is the dimple quilting is going to show on this side too. So if I decide to dimple quilt it, I'll take this pocket. I'll make sure that when I come near the pocket that I'm not catching the pocket. So it's however you want to do. It would be possible to dimple quilt it and not go all the way through to the inside lining. But you know, on a journal like this, I don't even think it's necessary for me to dimple quilt any of these big spaces. It's going to be thoroughly secured all the way around the edge, and then every so often you have these stitches to secure things. And you know what? I looked right here, right now, and realized I didn't secure this edge. And I'll go back and do that, and I won't go through all the layers. I'll just slide my fingers in there and put a few little stitches. Okay, that's my mistake for the day. So let's fold it up and see how it's going to look when we do get it done. And how cute is that? And the little bird, he's our little feature. So that was a fabric collage in and of itself. And if you want to use a piece all your own, go ahead and make first your feature item, your little puffy, I call them, and then decide what you want to add to it. Okay, so let's look at the bottom. Oh, I love that stuff hanging out. That would be just great. And I can hang a little bit of journal jewelry on here if I want to. I'll just hook right into some of this crochet and add a few dangles. You can add buttons, ribbons, bows, yo-yos, hexagons, anything that you want. All right, I hope you're stitching along with me. Thank you for watching today, and leave me a thumbs up if you like fabric arts, and maybe a suggestion on what kind of things you might like to make. I'll be back with you again after I get this all stitched to show you the final project, and maybe we'll just sew in a few pages of a journal. All right, thanks. See you soon. Bye.